Welcome to Artwell. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly, and this is the show where we are on a mission to understand what it means to do art well. Today on the show, we are joined by Frances Fisher. You might recognize her from her roles in the Oscar-winning films Titanic, where she played Ruth DeWitt Decatur, Kate Winslet's mom, or in Unforgiven, where she played Strawberry Alice. Before we get into today's interview, I want to remind you that if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the show, and if you want even more from me, you can check out the Artwell newsletter at the link in the show notes.
There are no breaks in this business. You make your breaks.
The reason I'm in this room right now is because my music's very dope.
Let's try to find something that people remember 20 years later.
If you just truly love cinema with enough passion, then you can't help but make a good movie.
Break rules. Leave the world more interesting for your being here. Make good art.
I was wondering if you could tell me about Jean Goza.
Oh my God, you did do your research. Jean Goza, God rest his soul, was a shift worker when I was a secretary at Firestone Synthetic Rubber and Latex Company when I was 18 years old after I graduated high school. I didn't want to go to college because I had a very tumultuous schooling because I lived in many different countries and I was always the new kid in school. And so when my father said, well, you can go to college, I said, do I have to? And he said, no, it's elective. I said, I want to get out into the workforce. So I became a secretary. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, when I got to work, I would sign in all the shift workers who were on the 12 to 8 shift. And one day, Jean Goza came up to me with so much enthusiasm. He said, Frances, you've got to audition for this extravaganza that Orange, Texas does every 3 years, which is everybody who has any kind of creative inclination at all. We all get together and we do skits, we do songs and dances, we do little scenes for the rest of the community. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll try that. And I did. I was part of this troupe, and we did this thing for our community. And when I was there, this guy comes up to me, Bobby Papania, and he says, I'm a director. Yeah, I direct at the Orange Playhouse, and we're doing a production of Summer and Smoke, Tennessee Williams. Would you like to audition? And this was like the first time I ever even thought about plays. So I read the script, fell in love with Tennessee Williams, his writing, his poetry. I went down and auditioned, and first time ever in my career, I got the job right on the spot. It was just a community theater production, but the feeling of having done the audition, which I'd never done before, and, Bobby saying, you want to do this? I said, absolutely. I was so excited. And so I always credit Jean for putting me into the right place at the right time so that the next step can happen. And that seems to be what my career is all about. There's no forethought. It just happens.
Prior to Jean coming up to you, you hadn't really done much acting. I know you did Jinx the Elf when you were 12, but since then, nothing, right?
Oh, my God. That's amazing that you know that. I wrote a little play when we lived in Turkey, and I called it Jinx the Elf, and I made it all about me. The elf. I was the bad elf. And, we wrote the play. I did it with my schoolmates. I was in the 7th grade, and we did it for the rest of the community. At the time, we were living in Ereğli, Turkey, and we all lived on the side of a mountain in houses that were made of cement. And there was a big mess hall that we all went to at night to have dinner. And all the bachelors lived there too, all the construction workers who didn't have their families. There were big barracks behind. And so I did the play there after dinner. And the only thing I forgot was lighting. we rehearsed the play. I directed it. I was in it. Everybody had their stuff. And it was a good little play with a beginning, middle, and end. But by the time dinner was over, it was so dark. They had to turn all the overhead lights on. And I thought, oh, okay, next time, lighting.
Between then and Gene talking to you, what was kind of your creative outlet? Like, you weren't acting much in between those two things, right?
No, that was just my creative outlet always was drawing. I drew ever since I was very, very little, and pads and pads of artwork, and I would draw cartoons. And they all were lost in a fire, unfortunately, because I sure would have liked to have known what that little girl was writing about, but I have nothing. That's
hard. But then, so drawing was the creative outlet, and then Gene comes up to you. Gene, that is the catalyst that then leads you to Bobby Papania. And then I believe it was John Holland who told you had what it took to make it. And then you went to New York and lived with Ann Buckles, I believe.
Well, back up a little bit. John Holland was a New York actor who came to Orange, Texas to retire because that's where he was from. And we were all very impressed that a New York actor was coming into our little community. And he saw all the plays, and after one, and there was nothing to do after the theater, went dark. We would usually go to somebody's home and have something to eat and drink and whatever. And we were sitting on a couch, and he said to me, you can get out of this town. You've got talent. Really? He said, yeah, you could actually have a career as an actress, and I can help you if you want. He said, the first thing that I needed to do was learn about stagecraft, the lighting back in Turkey. He said, I'll send you to the Barter Theater in Virginia. You'll be an apprentice with a lot of other young kids starting out. And there I learned everything about stagecraft. I assisted the director. I built sets. I struck sets. I painted them. I sewed costumes, swept the dressing rooms, cued the actors. I ushered. I learned everything about what goes into a production, and that gave me my respect for crew today because I know what they do. So one of the actresses I cued was Ann Buckles, who had jobbed down from New York City. And at the end of the season, she said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I guess I'm going to go to New York. I don't know how, because like I said, I never planned anything. And she said, would you like to come and be a nanny? I have a 3-year-old daughter, Yvonne, and you can be in charge of her, take her to school in the morning and bring her home, take her to the park, get her ready for bed, and then you'll have your nights free. And so that's what I did. I went from, Virginia to New York City, living in the maid's room on Park Avenue. And I learned that the HB Studios was a good place to study. So I took a couple of classes at night, and that started me on my way. So I had a job, and I had a creative outlet to learn. I studied with Austin Pendleton and a couple of other people whose name, because I'm a little bit nervous right now talking about all this, trying to remember, my gosh. But that was my beginning in New York City in 1973. Yeah, I was 21.
And you ended up training under both Stella Adler and Lee Strasberg, right?
Yes, because when I was at the studio, then I started, HB Studios, talking to other actors and finding out like where the watering holes were for actors to go, because New York it's very easy to get around. And I learned that there were 3 acting teachers that were the primo ones: Sandy Meisner, Stella Adler, and Lee Strasberg. And I researched all of them, and I thought, I cannot afford to study with all 3. So from what I understood back then in my early 20s is that Lee Strasberg and Stella Adler were prime in what they were teaching, but were at opposite ends of the spectrum. So I thought, well, let me study with both at the same time, and I'll be able to take from both of them what I need and go on, because they were both kind of, they were getting up there, and I didn't want to take a chance that one of them would pass before I had a chance to study. So I became a member of the Actors Studio. I auditioned and became a member of the Actors Studio. So I was able to do work with other members in the sessions. And Lee on Fridays would moderate while other people in the audience gave their opinions too. And then on Tuesdays, there would be other guest moderators like Shelley Winters and Lee Grant and Al Pacino and, all of the amazing actors who had given so much to theater and film.
How were they on the opposite ends of the spectrum? Like, I know very little about both of them and their approaches. So how were they different?
In very broad strokes, my understanding is that what Lee was teaching was a very personalized way of creating a character, which is finding a connection between your own experience and magnifying it to be the character. And also, there were a lot of exercises that we would do, like sense memory exercises and effective memory and coffee cup and sensory things like that, all very connected to your inner life. Stella, on the other hand, said, use your imagination, which also Lee did too, but it was just a different approach. Stella said, put the shoes on, then you'll know how the character walks. Understand the circumstances, understand the political situation, understand what religion is your character, if any. Where does she live? What does she do? And that kind of coincided with doing what one of the exercises that Lee taught, which is private moment. You create a private moment with your character that's outside of the play, which could be as simple as making your bed and trying to get all the cat hair off of it. And just whatever you would do, where if somebody walked into the room, you would change your behavior. So a lot of people would choose, taking a bath or something a lot more personal and private. But anything can be a private moment if you change your behavior if somebody walks into the room. With Stella, I took scene study class. And so obviously all of us in the audience at school would watch people do their scene, and Stella would then critique it and give suggestions. I decided that I was going to work on Romeo and Juliet, because even though I was too old to ever play Juliet, even though on the stage, people have played her in their 50s, because the forgivingness of stage is, there are no close-ups. You can be anyone you want from far away. So I worked on the famous balcony scene. So it was my turn up. I was in my flowing nightgown. I walk out onto the stage. I smell the jasmine. I look up and I see the moon. And I walk over to the balcony. And I go, Romeo. And she goes, stop. I can smell a Strasberg student at 20 paces. Get off the stage. Seriously, she did that. And I just shriveled. And I skulked off behind to change my clothes. And as I was changing my clothes backstage, Stella proceeded to do the monologue. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Oh my God. That was one of the most horrifying experiences I ever had. And then I've come to find out that she was always very rough on young women because she didn't want young women to just go on their looks. She wanted them to work hard. She was very nice to the young men, but the young women were a lot of times left the class in tears. And later on, I became friends with her. You know, I redeemed myself, not in the scene study class, because I thought, I don't want to do that anymore. But I took her script interpretation class, which was an amazing experience. I still have my book, my book, this thick, literally, we would study the famous American playwrights and then the European playwrights. And we would go into great depths studying, for instance, Tennessee Williams. Why did he write A Streetcar Named Desire at that time in his life? And if you read their autobiography, then you find out what was motivating all of these writers to write at that period of time in their lives. And that was a very, very valuable lesson to me, to be able to understand the playwright so you understand their work on a deeper level.
I do want to talk more about scene interpretation, but I want to know first, what did you do in those like 15, 20 seconds on stage right before you started the monologue that Stella knew you were also a Strasberg student?
I think it was because I walked out and I was doing sensory work. You know, I was feeling the space, and I smelled the jasmine, and I looked up at the moon, and it was a sensory thing to get me into the space. And she just called it out. She knew I was doing Lee's work, not hers. I don't know what another actress would have done doing her work, like maybe walk out there and just start talking. I don't know. But that's all I knew based on what I had learned at the Actors Studio, you know, set the place, because on stage, you have to make a lot of it up. You know, it's not like doing a film, you know, where it's all right there. You're in the house. You've got it, you know.
It's almost like, so this might be not the best way of looking at it, but Stella's style was almost from the outside in, but Lee's was from the inside out.
That's exactly what I've said. And then, of course, it blends, but that's a shorthand of it. You know, Lee also talked about, you know, if you get the right coat, you'll feel that character. But his was more of a sensory experience, and Stella was just use your imagination, just imagine it. And then Lee had the what if, the circumstances, something that you've never, ever experienced before. And you just say, what if? What if I do that? What if this is what's happening? You know, it's just all ways to stimulate your imagination. That was what was the common denominator.
And then for you, being able to, learning on both sides, you're able to kind of pull from both of those. So you can both go from the inside out and the outside in when creating your characters.
Yeah. And it all works, you know, write the character's history. I always thought, well, why do that? But if you get specific and you spend the time to write your character's history down, then you've got it. Then it's written down. There's something magic that happens between the hand and the paper if you write something down. I don't know if the same thing happens when you're with phones, you know, writing or typing with your thumbs. I don't know if the same alchemy occurs, but I have many, many notebooks of all the characters I've played and their history, which is personal to me. But it also, again, is stimulating so that one character is very different from another. If I'm playing an upscale mother who's having a problem with her daughter, how do I make that character different from that? Besides, you know, the place and the possibly the dialect I'm using, whatever.
When doing that, is it really just kind of running with your own imagination? Like, what does that look like for you when you're trying to create the backstory of your character?
Well, the clues are always in the script if it's well written. That's why, doing scene work, I always did plays because plays are tried and true. Plays have been done. Plays, especially the classic plays, they're classic for a reason. There's a beginning, middle, end. There's character development, character arcs. Some of the material that we read and some of the material that I've seen kids bring in to scene study class are just, like movie scripts. Not that movies are bad, I'm not saying that, but some of them get scenes off the internet that have no pre-scene or post-scene. It's just a scene. And it's like, oh my God. I'm getting off track because I could go into how sad our business has become, but that's for later if we can get to that. But right now about creating the character, getting the clues from the script about my character. And also one of the things that I learned from my teachers is that what other people say, other characters say about your character is valuable too. They're either lying or telling the truth, and you can make that distinction based on what you dissect in the script. But that's also important too. So all of those little facts that are in the script also contribute to the backstory of my character. If, for instance, I say, yes, when my mother died at blah, 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 I would write that into her backstory and maybe do a private moment about it. Just anything to get it in my body.
So it's taking what's known about the character, which is what's in the script, and then backfilling from that information, essentially.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm always curious about how people dissect the script and how that changes from person to person, what the process looks like to create that backstory. So that's really interesting. And a lot of that, was that built out of kind of the scene interpretation class? Like, is that where you learned how to do a lot of that?
I don't remember which teacher, or was it both teachers? Or if it was all of us who just said, I would read interviews with actors that I admire, and I would see there was a consistent kind of through line about how they approach characters. And some of them would say, yeah, just write a one page of your history, just so that it's different from another character that you may be playing.
And so how did you find your own unique style as an actor?
I don't think I have a style. I try to be truthful. That's what I try to do. I feel as if when one gets on stage and the light is on, it's like what is it when you're being interrogated in a police station? It's like, it's the light of truth. You have to tell the truth when you're on stage. And if you're not telling the truth, you have to stop and find the truth.
As kind of building on that and reframing the previous question a little bit, one thing I've noticed with younger creatives is they oftentimes spend the early part of their career trying to be someone else. And then over time, they learn to be more just authentically themselves. And I feel like that lends to getting towards those moments of truth. So the question, I guess, instead of finding your own style, but were you trying to be like or imitate someone else on stage earlier in career? And then over time, did you become more yourself?
Imitate someone else? You mean like another actor?
Another performer, yeah, like someone who inspired you.
No.
No, never?
No. It's always been a personal thing. And it happens when you read the script. It's like you're either interested in what the story is and then your character's participation in the story, or you're not. And if you're not, it's like, oh, good, I don't have to continue with this because I don't have... There's something that happens inside when you get excited and stimulated and you can see it. Oh, another thing that Stella advised us on, which was fantastic. She said the first time you read the script is the most important. And most scripts are 2 hours, take 2 hours to read. Give yourself 3 or 4 hours. Read every word Don't worry about the periods and the commas. Just read every word and let your imagination see what that first scene is about. Imagine the furniture in the room. Imagine the people in the room. What are they wearing? Imagine yourself talking so you can actually read it and let your imagination be filled, because this is the first time. This is the first time. You'll never have another first time of reading something again. So those impressions that you get are very, very important. I've never forgotten that.
And so what does that then look like? So if it takes you 2 hours to read, but you're reading over 3 to 4, is that like, are you taking kind of breaks to visualize things between scenes as you're reading it? Like, what does that process look like when you're reading it the first time?
Well, it's interesting because the last movie I did, Desert Road, now this is a film, it was about 80, 90 pages, and I gave myself the 2 hours, 2.5 hours that I thought it would take. I read it, and I could not turn the page. I read it in the time it took to turn the pages. I just flew into it because I could see it, I could feel it, I understood it, and it was really exciting to not have to put a script down and go, oh, let me get a cup of tea and recheck my messages. I'm bored. This one I wanted to see all the way through. And I got to tell you, what Shannon Triplett did with this movie, the writer-director, it's the same way. Once you get on that train, you don't get off it till the end credits.
And so, obviously, without talking about spoilers or anything with the new film, with Desert Road, what is it about a screenplay that grabs you like that makes you see, feel, and understand it in that way?
It's the story. If the story is told, there's one script that I read in the same way, Unforgiven by David Webb Peoples. That script, I've never seen the description written that way. He wrote it like a novel. So instead of it being exterior, the horses they ride up on their horses, there is a description of how they're riding up, like what's going on. It was not long, all the description, but it really just puts you right into the scene. So I read that one right through too. Another one that I read right through was Titanic. It flowed. I didn't have to go back and no, what just happened there? It moved forward in a way that was understandable. And it took me a while to read it because I did use that technique of just imagining, the people in every situation. And I have tear stains on that page that has the one line that says the elderly couple are in their bed holding each other as the water is rushing in. The mother putting her children to bed in third class. Imagine that, Yeah.
And so is that part of it? I guess so like part of it is story, but is it like almost something that can't be put into words, almost like an emotional response when you're reading it that you can't necessarily quantify that grabs you? Is that part of it too?
Yeah, I think if I'm engaged, right, I'm thinking about it and I'm imagining that person saying that thing to another person, and you kind of see it in your imagination. And I get hooked like that when I'm reading something. I know it's good. After all my training in theater, and I spent 14 years in New York City doing theater off Broadway. And then I did a soap opera too, which was like,
The Edge of Night, right?
The Edge of Night, yeah. And, it's like, did I want to, understand the thinking of the writers who were writing this material, because I thought all of a sudden, wait a minute, there's a committee writing. From whose soul is this coming? And when I started auditioning for TV series, I realized there wasn't a single voice writing these scripts. It was a committee. I saw it was a little difficult to understand. It took me a while to get into that television and that television head, unless there's somebody like, say David Kelly now, who writes alone and you hear his voice.
What is that process like? Because I've never at once considered that. How I obviously know that TV shows are written by committee, and I often say, like, I believe art, when done well, is an exchange of soul, because you're putting a little bit of your soul into the art, and if it connects with people, they're taking it and making it a part of their own. So when that soul isn't being there, when it's multiple people, like, how do you find your way in?
Multiple souls. You just adjust, then you rely on the material, on the text. And there's also a collaboration that can happen too with the showrunner if you want to, change a line because it feels better. I did The Sinner with Bill Pullman a couple of years ago, and we had great permission to shift something around if it didn't. Like Bill would say, if it doesn't come out of your mouth, then there's something wrong, not with you, but with the line. I mean, we're professionals, we can make those adjustments. So it becomes a more collaborative experience with television. I've been lucky. Unless I'm like a guest star and you just get plugged into the machine. It's like, okay, I'm going to jump on this merry-go-round and go as fast as I can just to hold on to the pole. Oh, God.
And you actually tell me a little bit more about kind of New York in that period of time. Recently I've been fascinated a lot by just like different scenes throughout time. Like obviously you have New York for actors in the 70s, even comedy in LA in the 70s. And I feel like now, because of the internet, scenes don't form in the way they once did, because not everyone needs to be in the same geographical location. So like, can you just tell me a little more about what it was like acting in New York in that period of time?
Oh my God, it was so great. We had La Mama, I got there in 73 and 74, 75. There was so much theater going on. It's interesting because Emmett Walsh just passed. And I remember Emmett, I did a play with him in 1976 at St. Clement's Church that had a theater in it. And, he was a character actor who just did so many parts that made him pop. He was a remarkable actor who could take one small scene and be memorable in it just by what he did, how he chose his character's behavior. Elia Kazan would say that behavior is the decoration on the skirt of acting. All of acting is behavior. How you move, how you pick up a coffee cup. That's why we would do the coffee cup exercise. Cheers. There was so much going on, so many little theaters. And there was a place where we would all congregate, Jimmy Ray's and Joe Allen's, which was in the theater district. It's where everybody would go after they'd seen a play or been in a play, and bonds were formed. It was a great time, and that doesn't exist in Los Angeles, because when I came out to Los Angeles in 1988, it's like it's a desert. There was no place where actors congregated, and I feel bad for actors starting out here because one feels so isolated. I had the good fortune of starting my career in New York, and I'm very, very grateful for that. also the theater district was all there. It was all, Broadway was all there. And of course the little theaters had popped up all over the place, but it was exciting. You run into people on the street too, right? You run into people. I remember when I took over the role of May in Fool for Love on 42nd Street. That was Sam Shepard play. And I only got the blocking from the stage manager because Sam had long gone. And I tracked him down. He was at another theater rehearsing something, and I waited for him after the rehearsal was over. And I said, Mr. Shepard, I'm doing your play, Fool for Love. I wonder if you could come and just watch a rehearsal before I go on, because I'm a little girl. And he goes, you know what? I birthed that baby already. I'm sure you're going to be fine. He turned her walked away. Oh my God. But at least I asked, But it was interesting that as a director, as a writer-director, he figured, he birthed that baby. And the other incarnations were not his business.
I'm sure, too, like you said, like just with the condensation of actors all in that one place, like you could just feel it in the air, I feel like, when you lived there.
Yeah, you walk down the street and you run into people because, everybody would make their rounds. The other thing is that casting offices were very accessible. You just walk in and go up the elevator to the floor and you knock on the door. In LA, you can't get in anywhere. The studios are you have to have a pass. It was a much more collegial feeling being in New York and then you ran into so many people at the theater because everybody went to the theater. Being poor, I only saw the second act of every play on Broadway because theater tickets, even back then, for me, were very, very expensive. And so I learned from one of my pals that, you hang around at intermission and everybody's filing back in. Nobody has to show their ticket. Everybody just walks in. You just kind of walk in and you find an empty seat. And I saw so many second acts. I can say that now because it's funny. But we all did that. We were poor,
And so when you finally take the jump to Hollywood, which I believe came at the advice of Robert Mitchum.
Yeah.
How did the idea of Hollywood live up to the reality of Hollywood when you got there?
Well, it was never Hollywood for me. I mean, that's a construct that's in people's minds. I mean, I was about acting. And also, I just want to let you know that I didn't stay a nanny forever. I worked for Ann Buckles for about a year, I think. And then her life changed and she moved away. And I, had a boyfriend and moved into the rooming house that he was living in on 46th Street, actually on Restaurant Row. Across the street was a rooming house, and he was a photographer. So we, set up our household together, and I started bartending because that was like the best job to have, not being a waitress because you're caught between the kitchen and the cook and the customers. So as a bartender, everybody wants what's behind me. And I was I had nice protection and able to talk with people. And I bartended in the theater district. And The Wiz was playing next door. So I knew all those kids in The Wiz and others. Yeah. And one time, I'll tell you this story. One time, there was a stagehand who would always come in during intermission to have his little whiskey, and then also afterwards, he always sat right next to all the fruits and stuff like that I had on the side to make the fancy drinks. And he said, "Frances, are you available at such and such night?" And why? He said, "Because there's one seat available front row. Frank Sinatra Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington are having a night in the theater. Do you want to go? Oh my God. So little old me got to sit in the front row, kind of to the side, not center, but I got to see them live. That is a memory I'll never forget. That's New York.
Can you tell me more about that night, those performances?
Oh my God. The energy on stage and the energy coming back from the audience. I mean, it was a party. You know, I'd never heard music like that before. I mean, my parents, played Frank Sinatra and little Ella Fitzgerald, Duke Ellington, but the three of them together, I'd never heard that before. It was remarkable.
That must have been such a cool experience, especially for it to have come up so suddenly. Like, not to have been a ticket you bought that you were waiting to go to, that it just kind of fell in your lap. That must have been so cool.
Yeah, I knew nothing about it. It's just because I was nice to this guy, He did me a favor back, Yeah, it was, yeah.
And it doesn't happen like that in LA.
I don't know if anybody can get in anymore unless they paid $1,000 for. I mean, can you imagine what a ticket like that would cost today? Oh my Lord!
It is truly crazy how expensive concerts have gotten, just in general.
Well, that's the only way that the musicians can make money anymore. They don't have a union, they don't have health care. It's the haves and have-nots.
On that note, I promised we would come back to how sad the business has become. Talk to me about kind of the current state of the business.
Oh my God. If you're lucky enough to get an offer, you are lucky. For most people starting out, they don't even have health care because you have to this year, I'm talking about film now, film and television. You have to make $27,540 a year to qualify for SAG-AFTRA health insurance. It's hard to make that. If you're starting out, my heart goes out to the kids who are starting out today. I don't know how they do it. I really, really don't, because I don't know where the luck happens. You running into somebody at Joe Allen's and go, hey, you know what? You'd be right for this thing I'm doing. Call my office and write it down on a napkin. That's the way it was in the 70s, I got a job with Henry Jaglom just sitting at Cafe Central one night at his table with a bunch of people. He goes, I'm about to go into pre-production and I need a production manager. Does anybody know? I go, I know. I lied. And I said, if you give me a part in your movie, I'll do the production managing. I had no idea. And I thought, well, I had my theater managing thing. But basically all it was finding locations and things like that. And I was living in a loft at the time. Well, I need 2 locations. I go, well, my front room looks like that. And my back room looks like that. You can use my loft. Boy, solve the problem. And I had a tiny, tiny part called Can She Bake a Cherry Pie with dear departed Karen Black. And oh my God, I have so many stories that are swimming through my head now. I should probably write a book. All the people I've met along the way. Oh, and Robert Mitchum. Okay. So anyway, after a while, after tending bar, I started getting work, and I got a Dristan commercial that paid me $5,000 for the year. It's like, oh my God, I'm rich. I got $5,000. But I was doing the soap opera, and then I did that for 4 years. So that consumed me a couple days a week. And I would do like off Broadway, on the weekends, to keep my acting up. Plus I was, got into the actor's studio. Then my contract was up. So I was kind of free, and I started doing more and more guest spots in television in New York. And I was doing The Equalizer, and Robert Mitchum and I were sitting, in the little circle that with our chairs, and we just, struck up a friendship. And eventually he said, why don't you spread your wings and go to Los Angeles and start doing movies? And that was another moment in my life that said, oh, that's what I should do. I was so naive when I got to New York. I didn't even know I had to have an agent. I would walk into casting offices and in advertising agencies with my headshot, because my boyfriend was a good photographer, so I had headshots. And I would say, I want to do a commercial. Can you help me? And the girl would look at me and you need to have an agent and you need to have an appointment in this. It's like, oh God, I didn't know. There was nothing, there were no books that said how to get into the business. I'm sure there are now. I'm sure there are a lot of books. I don't know how helpful they are, but I could have used some help. But by hook or by crook, I just followed what was in front of me. And so when Bob suggested that, it happened that my brother was living in Los Angeles, in Burbank. So I called him and I said, I think it's time for me to move to Los Angeles and get into the movie business. Oh, I know. The other impetus was that I did a movie called Tough Guys Don't Dance that was based on a book that Norman Mailer wrote. And then he directed it. And it was my first movie ever, big paying studio movie. And I made more money in those 6 weeks than I had my entire year when I was doing theater. So I was already thinking, you can make more money in movies than in theater. And then, dovetail that into Bob a few years later saying, spread your wings. So I did. I moved out to California and slept on a blow-up mattress in my brother's living room in Burbank.
And I mean, I think you deserve a lot of credit for that. One, talking about you just going into the casting, going into advertising agencies or different casting offices, I feel like people wouldn't do that now, just to take it upon themselves. I'm just going to walk in there and see if I can make this happen for myself. I think a lot of credit to you for doing that. And two, being willing to go sleep on the couches after doing 14 years in New York to make it in the movie business. I just want to give you your flowers for that. That is awesome.
Well, the other thing is my naivete because of my theater background. I was 36 years old when I moved out to Los Angeles. That's not young to start out with a movie career. But I didn't understand that. I didn't know that. I figured at 36, I'm like, I haven't even reached my prime yet because I imagine I'm going to work till I'm 80 or 90, because it's theater. And there were some great examples of actresses who were working way into their 70s and 80s. And Villa Gallienne just comes to mind. So coming to Los Angeles at 36, when I look back at it now, it's like, oh my God, I'm surprised I even got a job. But I started kind of at the bottom. I had played leads in theater all of those times because that's what my training is. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on a play unless I'm really invested in it, which is time and it's the character. But it didn't work that way with movies. I remember I found an agent somehow and he sent me a script and he said, read this script. And it's a Clint Eastwood movie. Clint Eastwood. Oh, yeah, he's the guy that my boyfriend took me to his movies back in Texas, Dirty Harry and stuff like that. That was my knowledge of that actor. And I remembered him as Rowdy Yates because my mother loved the older guy. So we had to watch Ride. Anyway, so I'm reading the script. I'm going, God, this is such a great role. Oh my God. It's like, yes, I want to audition for it. And my agent at the time said, well, no, that's going to Bernadette Peters. Go, why? It's already cast. Why are you giving this to me? Well, no, you're playing her little sister with a part that big. But I went toward the leading character because that's what my training was, and it was a good role for me. I thought, well, I got to start somewhere, and so I did. So I ended up doing that little bitty sister role instead. And the rest is history.
In that moment, why do you decide to tough it out in Los Angeles instead of going back to New York, where you get the leading roles, where there's a level of comfort there? Why stick it out and fight in LA?
That's interesting. Well, it wasn't so much of sticking it out and fighting. It was like, this is new territory and I wanted to figure it out. And I had lived in New York, like I said, for 14 years. Yeah. It can be a tough city too. And all of a sudden I was out in Los Angeles where the weather is nice. The people have yards. And I just needed that change. There are a lot of things between New York and me coming out to LA that I have nothing to do with my career. But I have some great stories, maybe for another time. Because one of the other things that my teacher said, no matter what you're doing, it's all information that can go into playing a character someday. So your life, like write your own life story. My other wonderful teacher, Sandra Seacat, who I met when I became a member of the Actors Studio, I studied with her after I stopped studying with Stella, because Sandra would do workshops and we would really go deep into creating characters. And she was the one who advised, keep a diary, because you're writing the life story of this person who is a character too. And then maybe by the end of it, you'll have an autobiography,
Which is so important, because I feel like there's almost a hustle culture now where it's like if you're not working, you're falling behind. But you need to live your life to have things to express through your work as well.
Oh, yeah, adventures. You have to go on adventures and try things and meet people and do things. I lived in the mountains of New Mexico with a group of people, never came down except for supplies. I mean, there are a lot of adventures. You learn how to live in the wilderness. That's always good. Maybe something that we'll all have to try someday. Oh, God, I don't want to get into politics.
Well, let's actually talk not necessarily on politics, but we've been an activist your entire life. That might be wrong, but I've read somewhere you marched against Vietnam, I believe, right? You're not afraid to speak up for what you believe in. I'll put it that way.
I did. Yeah, I did go to, very early on. Was I 17? I missed going to Woodstock. But I did go to Washington, D.C. for the, oh my gosh, what was it? Was it Vietnam? Vietnam was over. It was for abortion. It was, yeah. Standing up for people who have less than you do is something that I'm understanding. There are times when I didn't stand up for myself personally because of my upbringing and just the messages we get as human beings. And it's like, oh, I can't say that. I mean, as outspoken as I am about certain things, there are other things that I was very mute about, and learned that by playing a character who was pushed down and squelched. Squelched was the word that was used in this play. And I see acting also as a path of self-discovery, to find out, oh, I'm not like this person. What's in me that I could translate to that? Or, oh my gosh, I have been squelched too, and I never knew it. I didn't know I could speak up here in this situation. So it's almost like I'm catching up now. I want to stand up for somebody who wasn't able to speak up to themselves.
Has being outspoken impacted your career in any way, positively or negatively?
Oh, probably. Yeah. Yeah. But who knows? I'm sure there are lists. I see the same people getting the same jobs all the time, over and over. And I was looking at my IMDb last night, as a matter of fact, because I need to put some new stuff on the reel, because I've got The King Tide that's going to be coming out in Canada. I'm very proud of it. And then Desert Road. We're in the process of getting the right distributor. So I need to add those roles because they're very different, because during the pandemic, I let my hair grow white, and that was a big change for me because I was always the redhead. And it's been really, really interesting and freeing, and I'm working a lot. So I was looking at my IMDb. I thought, oh, they're putting trailers up now, because I hardly ever look. They're putting trailers of movies I've been in. And because I've played small parts, I'm not in the trailers. It's like, I gotta change that. So I was looking at like the biggest movies I've been in, like Titanic and Unforgiven, and I'm not in them either because I'm playing supporting roles. It's like, oh my God, I just cut myself off at the knees. I started out small instead of insisting, but the machine of this business, you could call it Hollywood, but I think that's more like it's still a business. Just to try to get in there with where everybody is trying to. Just kind of go with the flow. I don't know how to do it any differently.
One thing I will say is, as small as some of those roles are, you mentioned an actor, his name escapes me, who makes the most, even if he has just one scene. I feel like you're very similar.
Yeah.
Emmett Walsh, I feel like you're very similar. In preparation for this, I've obviously seen Titanic. I'd never seen Unforgiven, so I watched Unforgiven for the first time. I watched House of Sand and Fog. I watched Holiday, and I feel like you just make them, like, you are such a memorable character in every movie, despite no matter how long or short your screen time is. So I just want to say that as well, that the same way Emmett Walsh did that for you, I feel like you're a similar actor for me. When no matter how much time you're on screen, you always make the most of it, at least from an outsider's perspective. That's what I see.
Thank you.
Of course. What was the hardest lesson you had to learn in your career?
I didn't fight hard enough for the leading roles. I just took what came to me. Like the leading roles that came to me in theater in New York and, in regional theater. I just thought, oh, well, maybe I'm not good enough. That was a hard lesson, and I have a great support system that says, stop, you just didn't think highly enough. I wanted to be a respected actress, especially after what Stella did, shaming me for trying something. And I wanted to earn the respect of my community instead of just saying, I want to be a movie star, because movie stars are now the ones that are getting all the parts. I mean, they always do, but it's, God bless them. A lot of them are my friends, but it's like nominated for is, in this movie. It's you've got to have that cachet in order to get cast, because it's such a numbers business now, more than it ever was, I think. I mean, there are still independent movies that, where people will take a chance on newcomers. I'm hardly a newcomer. Yeah, I think I didn't aim high enough. But again, I didn't have the guidance. There was no book. And also I had people saying, teachers saying, don't go to the parties. That's not where it's going to happen. Keep doing your work. Keep doing your work. And that's what I focus on, work.
There is something to be admired about that, though. It was more about the craft than it was about the accolades. And I appreciate that.
But the accolades get you more work. That's what I finally figured out. You know what I mean? But people want to work with winners, you know, and also people like, I don't know. Oh, that person won an Academy Award. Let's pair that one up with the other Academy Award winner, even if they have no chemistry. They'll stick them in there and, you know, make a movie because we're going to make millions of dollars. I don't know. I'm never giving up. I love acting too much, you know. So sometimes the independent movies, that's where the kernels of gold are. You know, people, there's a whole slew of young writers and directors coming up. And I was like, you need a grandma? Or you need a witch?
Kind of on this note, when you do take the time, like last night where you're going through your IMDb and you can kind of see all the work there laid out in one place, how do you feel when you look back on the journey?
I'm happy to know that once I decided to be an actress and started earning money, I've been able to pay my way the whole time. And that's something that I have to honor, that I've been able to make my health care every year. Maybe not this year because of the strike. Oh my God. Got to earn that $27,540 before September. You know, that's a pressure that a lot of us feel. I'm not alone. Looking at all those, I have memories when I see the name of a project, or I look at the clip and I go, oh, I remember that day. I remember that day. And I think, boy, I've done, you know, why did I do that? Oh, I needed to make my health care. See, the other thing is, in terms of career trajectory, the lucky ones build upon what they've done. It's like they did that, and I did that, and I did that. Wow. Some of us were not so lucky. It's like after Titanic, I didn't work for a year because every offer I got was to play the snooty mother of the daughter who didn't want her to date the boyfriend. I mean, it was just so unimaginative. So I did not work for a year, but I kept my health insurance because I grabbed a little job to make it. And it was a lateral move. It was not a step up. Do you know what I mean? So I'm looking at my IMDb and I'm going, oh, okay, I did that. Oh, I did that for the health insurance. I did that. Oh, I did that because I love that person. I did that because it was a good script. And, you know, we were all told that you can have good years and bad years, and all actors do, you know, most actors do. And there are some lucky ones who are blessed. Your choices are everything, you know, and I try to make choices where there's something that's important to impart to an audience. It's not just like, I will not do horror, and I don't want to do those things, even though they pay a lot of money. Not that I would be asked, but those things where you've got green screen and I don't know. But by doing something to work, because I consider myself, as a friend of mine said, a paper bag actor. It's like going from job to job, you know, because I don't know what the next job is going to be. And there are actors who are lucky enough to have their next 5 jobs lined up, you know, but that's not my life. I've always just gone, you know, the path is not seen, but as soon as I put my foot down, I feel the stone. And that's kind of the spiritual journey I'm on.
Kind of speaking about, you mentioned how following Titanic, you didn't really work for a year because Hollywood, I think I heard someone say this, Hollywood's a business that loves to run to where lightning just struck. I'm hoping it'll strike again. You're getting like the same role. I believe after Unforgiven as well, you were you had a bit of a period where you didn't work.
Let's see. That was 93. I had my daughter. She was born in 93. It came out in 93. So we shot it in 92. And then I had my daughter. So I was, spending time with her. I noticed, that there are spaces between years where it's like it just stops. And I go a few years. I realized, that's when I was doing theater again, because I've continued to do theater, not as often as I like because it doesn't pay, but I do as much theater as I can. And there was a period, I think it was from 79 to 83 or something. I'm like, what happened? How did I survive? What was I? I was doing theater. I was doing regional theater, touring and things like that. A couple of off-Broadway things. But 94, didn't I work the next year? Yeah, I did Female Perversions, and I played a stripper. And I remember Susan Streitfeld, the director, saying, I can't believe you just had a baby, because my body was in such good shape because I was young, 41.
Kind of speaking on how Hollywood is becoming more and more of about the numbers than it's ever been before. How do you feel about the word content?
That's how I feel. It's just putting everything into a big bin and calling it all the same thing. Content. It's like, we got to fill this up. It's dehumanizing. It's not artistic. Content could be anything, right? It could be games. It could be music. It could be film. It could be anything. And it's just like, let's just dump it all in and fill this can up and stream it out. So I don't like that word. It's not inventive, and it's not creative. It's just easy. It's what the tech guys say, right?
Exactly. I think that's actually where it came from. I think it was what they used to say, just anything that was in the internet was the contents of the internet, and it just became content. And that's kind of how we got to that word today. It was like an old, 90s internet term.
Yeah. And now, everybody in the business calls it content. Even artists. It's like, stop, don't call it that. Call it a play. Call it a movie. Call it a film. People are making films again on film. Kodak.
And part of with this word content is there's so much of it now. Do you think the best art can still rise to the top, or is there just so much saturation now that it doesn't work that way anymore?
Money runs everything, doesn't it? I mean, you see it with the Oscars, which is supposed to be the most prestigious moment in a year, to give accolades to the best of everything. And you see that what rises to the top mostly is the material. That's possible, because we do call, strips material. Product, no, it's not product. That's another word I can't stand. It sounds like hair polish or something. It's if something is advertised enough and put in front of somebody enough, you tend to think, that must be better than the one I saw less times. And so that rises to the top. And there's so many great films that don't even get a chance to see the light of day because of the politics of it all, And
now there's AI and everything, which, as you're well aware, complicates things even further.
Yeah, that's a sticky wicket. I was on the negotiating committee at SAG-AFTRA, and I'm on the standing committee when stuff comes up. And it was tough going, as you know, WGA went in first and we were right after them. And it took a lot to get what we got. And there's more to get, but we got enough to get us through the next 2.5 years because of the rapidity of development of all of these tools. There were people that were very upset that we were negotiating for protections in that area. But it's like the people who did the silent films being upset that sound was coming in, and to rail against sound, talkies, it was a losing battle because, I mean, you could still do silent films if you wanted, but technology was moving forward. And that's what this is. And I know people who work with AI, and it can be used as a tool to help things. But, the fear in my community is that they think they will be replaced by these AI creatures and all that. And so we put protections around certain things, and more to come, as things develop.
And we talked about soul earlier, like art made with AI has no soul in it if it was made by a computer. How I like to look at it is like, I like it if it can enhance the performance. I don't want AI to be the performance.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, it's what Shelley Winters said when I was doing a scene. She said, don't worry about the words, the lines. It's what's happening in the air between the actors. That's the magic that we all want. An AI replica or synthetic being is not going to come up with anything creative and spontaneous. It's only going to be a replica of something that has happened before. And we all know that. And I don't know if an AI creation, digital replica, is ever going to fool anybody by making them think it's real. That's why even when movies were started being made on digital as opposed to film, because you can see, I can see the difference, can feel the soul of the film when it's on film, and the early HD stuff was just awful. And it's getting better with filters and all that, but still I can feel it. I don't know. I'm sure you can too, right? You can feel the difference. And so when you think about acting, it's like, how do you create a real moment with two things that are just nothing but, dots on a screen that look like people, but is there anything real happening?
How do you know when you're doing a scene, when you've stumbled onto something that was unplanned but makes it better versus something that was unplanned that doesn't make it better?
You're talking about just going with your impulse, which is what we're trained to do in theater. We rehearse, and then just let it fly. It's a little different in television because television is so much more structured. And there's a time element. But if you have an impulse to do something, you do it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And you hope that the editor chooses the right take, that's more in alignment with what your intention is.
When you're doing a scene, what's kind of going through your mind in that moment? Are you I know you said you can't really think of the lines, so is it just being present in that moment? Are you thinking of the audience? Are you thinking of how this will come together? Like, what's going through your mind when you're doing a scene?
My relationship with the person I'm doing the scene with, my scene partner, and what I want and how many ways I'm going to get it, which is what will keep my behavior interesting, hopefully, or at least on track with what I want. That was another piece of advice I got from a studio member. Said that Lee always said the most important thing to do in any scene is, what do I want and how many ways can I get it? And the ways I can get it can be different. So you can either throw your partner off by trying it in a different way, or, skip around, and always be clear what you want. And if it's not working that way, you try it another way until you get it or you don't get it, depending on what the scene's about. I remember one time I was working with a coach on something really, really intense. And after I got home from work, we would talk about what my choices were, what worked, what didn't work. And one night I was like really depressed. I didn't accomplish anything. I never feel like I got it. Because sometimes you can do a scene, go, that's it, we did it. And you look around, everybody's going, yep, I just felt horrible. And then she said, well, what was the scene about? Oh, it was a scene where I lost the fight. I didn't get what I wanted. And she said, Frances, let this be a lesson to you. If you came home and said, I did great, it was great, that means you weren't in character. Because what you're feeling right now is exactly what the character is feeling. Character feels like she lost, because she did. Now, go have a glass of wine, have a good sleep. Tomorrow's another day. And all of a sudden I went, yeah, that's right. God, how many times does it take to remember that? Because when you're acting, you're in the moment. You don't think about the next thing. You're right there in the moment. Because that's where the magic is.
After the moment's over, how do you review your performance? Is it more just a feeling, like you said, where it's like, I feel this way? Or do you get very analytical about your performance after the fact when you're looking back on it?
No, there's the old actor, God, I could have, as you're driving home, you've heard actors say this a million times, or as you're on the way home, it's like, oh God, why didn't I try that? That's the joy of doing theater, because tomorrow night you can try that thing you thought about on the way home. That's why I love doing theater. You have 8 times a week to try it if you're doing a full production. But, movies, TV, it's in the can, done. The only time I can remember, it wasn't me, it was John Patrick Shanley, who redid a scene that Viola Davis did with Meryl Streep in Doubt. When he wrote the play, directed the play, and then got this amazing cast to make the movie. And Viola and Meryl did the scene. And then he was like, I think he said to me on the way home, he was like, God, there's something not right about it. Anyway, he redid this. They shot the scene again when it was feasible to reshoot in the schedule. And of course, that won Viola her award, because he had a completely different take on how that scene should go.
What does your process on the day look like? Like from the moment you get to set to the first time you hear action, like what does that period of time look like for you?
Well, you get to your trailer, put all your stuff down, get into your costume, get some coffee, they have breakfast, have a little bite of something, bring it into the trailer. And then either sit in the hair chair or the makeup chair, whichever one's empty, because there's a bunch of people in there. And to me, the hair and makeup trailer is the place where it all begins. It's ground zero, and it's the jumping off place. So the vibe in the hair and makeup trailer is really important. And I've been lucky enough, especially in my later career, to have such great fluff and puff teams. We affectionately call them that, where it's, great music, whatever it is to get you going, depending on what the mood of the scene is or whatever. And, you sit in the hair chair and get your hair braided up, whatever. And then you go into makeup and get dirtied up, or whatever the scene calls for. It's always different, And then if you need to run lines with your scene partner, find a place to do that. Maybe leaning over his chair and just running the lines while he's getting his makeup on or whatever. Or we go to a trailer and run the lines just to talk about it. It's always different. Every day is very different depending on the scene you're doing. And then you wait or you go visit somebody else and like, hey, how you doing? Whatever, make phone calls. And then, okay, everybody load up in the van. Then you get into the van. I'm thinking right now of when we were in Newfoundland, because I was playing somebody who was very dirty and messy hair. So it was very little had to be done in the makeup and hair trailer. Then we get into the van and drive to the location and then get out and go get into holding. There'd be a holding room or something, especially if it was cold. And usually, you say hey to the crew and they're setting up, finishing last touches to whatever they're setting up. And you go in there and meet up with the director and you say, well, this is the way I see it. And everybody kind of puts their ideas in, or they just say, well, let's just try something because we all seem to be ready. The first week is a little more awkward in a way. Then by the time you get to the middle and then the end, and everybody's got a rhythm and we know our characters better. We know what we would do. And it kind of becomes a much more organic process.
What's your relationship like with perfection? I've heard James describe this set of Titanic as a cult of perfection. So I'm curious, and I think he mentioned you in his rant about perfection on the set of Titanic. So I'm curious what your own personal relationship with perfection is on set.
Perfection?
Mm-hmm.
You mean perfection in the storytelling or perfection in performance or what he ranted about me? What?
But he was talking about, I don't know if it was in a book or an interview I listened to, but he talked about how on Titanic it was a cult of perfection. And the mantra was almost like, at least to him, was we either do it right or we do it until we get it right. And he talked about the different performers in the film, and he mentioned you in this little monologue, I guess, that he gave about perfection on the set of Titanic.
Oh, was it complimentary?
It was complimentary. No, it was very much so complimentary. It's the fact that like we are going to do this until it meets the standards we all have for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the character I play would want to be a perfect in her behavior, in everything, the way she speaks, and what she wants in life and all that. So I could see that would be something that I would be striving for, as opposed to in Desert Road, where I play a homeless woman, filthy, dirty, messy, and it's like there's perfection in that too. But I certainly wasn't striving for gotta get it right. It's like the canvas was much bigger and messier. As long as I was still telling the truth, it was okay. It's like, whatever. That's who she was. But, yeah, because it was perfection. You get it. Because Jim had some amazing shots. I mean, it's, getting the shots and the movement and the people behind and everything flowing like it's a painting that moves, right? The composition and all that. And we shot that dinner scene for a week. The scene in which Leo's character comes to dine with us. And Jim just shot every angle possible just to get every single movement there. So he had a menu of things to choose from, you know. And poor Jonathan Hyde, he played Ismay, the captain. And he walks and he goes, oh, because it was real caviar. It was good caviar too. Not real champagne, but real caviar. And he goes, oh, I'm going to be a connoisseur of caviar. I go, be careful, because every time the camera's on you, you're going to have to take a bite. And by the end of the week, he was so sick of looking at caviar. I think it cured him forever.
I can imagine. For a week, even a day would be tough, but a week, I can't even imagine.
It was interesting because Jim is a perfectionist in that he wants everyone to give 100%, not 99%. And that I respect about him so much, because all of us wanted to do the same thing. We were not slacking. And there was a time when the waiter had to get in between us, because there were a lot of people at that table and it was very crowded. And he was trying to serve something, and the camera was on him. They were setting up, and he didn't know what, because he was a background player, right? And he didn't know whether to say anything, because he's here with all these principals and they're the ones that are the most important. And I'll never forget his face. He goes, Mayday, Mayday, Mr. Cameron. I can't get my tray in here. And Jim goes, okay, stop, everybody. Okay, let's change this whole setup. We've got to get in here. Da, da, da. And did a whole change of the landscape so he could just gracefully, as it should be, get in there with the tray and serve like that. Why do I say it's just because there was no hierarchy on that set, even though the whole movie is about hierarchy in class, first class, second class, third class. But everyone was treated if you treated him with respect, he treated you with respect.
Can you tell me about the post-Thanksgiving soup you made?
How do you know that?
I don't remember. I don't have the source here. I just have post-Thanksgiving soup with a question mark.
Oh my God. What? Okay, so when did we start? We started sometime in August, I guess, September, October, November. Anyway, my daughter was 3 years old and she was potty training at the time. So they gave us all little casitas to be in when we were in Rosarito, where we shot. And of course, Kate and Leo were there every day. But I had days off, and I wanted to be home with Francesca as much as possible. And it was a 3-hour drive from Rosarito back to LA. And so I would go back, and Thanksgiving, I think we all had the day off. So I went up to have proper Thanksgiving with my family, and had to be back 2 days after Thanksgiving. So I came back a day earlier with the carcass and the pot of soup and made a big soup for everybody and had a little party at my casita with the cast and a lot of the crew who were there. And boy, I wish I had had a cell phone back then to take pictures of everybody. There's Leo on the couch and and Jim. Yeah, it was great. It was great. But that was, post-Thanksgiving turkey soup with all the trimmings.
I've heard that the crew, the cast and the crew really felt like one big family on the set of Titanic.
Yeah, it was a big family. We had 2 first ADs. That's how big it was. One who spoke Spanish and one who spoke English. Well, you interviewed. No, you didn't. You didn't interview. Who did you interview?
I interviewed Russell, the cinematographer.
Oh, Russell. Oh my God, Russell. Wow, what a job he did. Amazing.
And he came in last minute too, because it was supposed to be Caleb Deschanel. And then I guess him and Jim didn't necessarily see eye to eye. So Caleb left and Russell came in 2 weeks before the shooting started.
Wow. Did I know that? I don't know if I even knew that. That's amazing that he was able to digest all of that in 2 weeks before starting. Wow.
He asked Jim how he wanted the movie to look, and all Jim told him was it's a picture film, or it's a period film. You know what that looks like. And that was what he had to go on. That was the direction.
Wow. Yeah, a man of few words. It's a period film. Yeah, boy. It was a remarkable experience. Thinking back, I haven't thought about it in a while, just remembering all the little moments that I've talked about many times. So I probably don't need to talk about it here because it might just be, the same old. Yeah, a family, but that's usually what happens, when you create a theater family, because you're rehearsing all day with them. When you go into production, you're there every night with them and you get to know each other. And same with, if you're working on a TV series, you become family. You know each other and you've got your emotions on your sleeve most of the time in some way. And same with film. I've made many families. And now with cell phones, I have all these threads of all the movie families, so we can stay in touch. Just say, hey, congratulations on the baby. Yeah, it's the gypsy life, and I think that's probably why it appeals to me, because that's how I grew up. I was always moving different countries, being a new kid on the block, learning how to fit in quick, and then gone and going somewhere else. Start over.
Do you have any rituals, or did you at any point, to celebrate the completion of a film, or when something is as successful as Titanic? Do you have any personal things, appreciate those moments?
Oh, there were always wrap parties. There would be wrap parties after a production is finished. Yeah, it's closing night of a show. There's always a party at the end. A lot of times people have left, if it's a movie. So it's different. That's why some productions have a party at the beginning of a show. I know Clint Eastwood did that on one of the first movie I worked with him on. He had a little party at the motel that we were all staying at where were we? Up in the north somewhere. I can't remember. But it was a meet and greet. We're all going to work tomorrow and let's all meet each other, which is great, which is something that happens in theater, which I really love in the old days anyway, especially in regional theater, where you have the table read, right? But it's not just the actors and the director and the producer. It's all of the departments. Everybody sits in the circle or outside the circle or a second circle to listen to the play. And then you get to meet each other. You meet the lighting designer and the set designer and the costumer and all that. And you see, okay, we're starting this together. And that's how I've always thought. If I ever directed something, I would always start the morning like that, where everybody connects. So everybody knows that we're all doing this together.
Is there a period of your career that you look back and reflect on the most? Is there a period that stands out?
I mean, I rarely look back. I mean, I did last night to IMDb, but that was for a specific purpose. But career-wise, no, it's just, it's a roller coaster, Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low. In the low times, I'd be doing something else or traveling or, doing other things besides acting to have a well-rounded life, yeah.
Where do you keep all the memorabilia?
Don't look around. I have a storage unit. I'm like everybody else. I got a storage unit. I've got bins bins. And one of these days, I'm going to sort through them and, put a book together. Yeah. And I've got stuff around. I have a drawer that there's my Titanic corset. It's still there. Okay. I've got this I took out in honor of you because I thought we were going to do nothing but talk about Titanic. And I thought, oh my God, it's not chipped or anything. That's pretty amazing. But I have all my scripts. I don't know why I keep all my scripts, but there's something about the paper. That's the other thing. I lived in a time when they delivered a script so I could hold it in my hand and make notes on the paper. They don't do that anymore. It's so frustrating. They, email it to you and then you got to print it out and but I've got this though. You talk about memorabilia. Okay, I want to show you this. This I've had since Unforgiven. David Valdez gave this to me when I started Unforgiven. It's a beautiful leather-bound script holder. You put tabs. I do anyway. I put tabs for each scene I'm in and which days they are, so I know the day change and all that, right? That's kind of the nuts and bolts of starting the process. This,
Oh my God.
believe it or not, when I did The Sinner, it was 8 episodes. And because everything went back and forth in time, I had every scene marked out so I could correlate it with something that happened in another episode to make sure that it was right. And then down here, I would put the days I had to work and what scenes that were coordinated with the script so that I would know where I was at. And each day, I would put a different color. So I know, okay, Monday is green. Everything green is that day. And it would go back and forth. So that looks like kind of insanity, right?
No, but this is like the things I live for. This is the kind of stuff that just gets me excited. I love this.
Yeah, it's the nuts and bolts of acting.
And then, what are you writing on the script itself?
It's interesting that usually when the first pass, it was like, why is that happening? Or what does that mean? I would just ask questions like that and keep going, right? Not stop and go, why? Well, maybe it's going to be revealed. I don't have to know everything about this character in the beginning. It unfolds, and that's what creates the art, right? And then I would write it in pencil or sometimes pen because pencil fades. But here, for instance, I go, oh, this is the first time I'm asking this. He also asks me on page 7 in the dinner scene and also page 29. So I can refer to those pages and find out what he asked that's similar to mine. Did Lou leave? Why? Doesn't he think I've been thinking this and calling people? This is an inner question, like an inside question inside of me that I ask. So there's all that, Boy, I wish you could interview Bill Coleman. You should see his script. He writes every thought and doesn't erase anything. He's amazing that way. And how can you even see your lines? He's got so many notes. Anyway, yeah. So those are usually the notes and character notes, and you have an idea and you have a memory. Maybe something that you're reading is triggering a memory inside of you because, as I said earlier, when Stella said, give yourself enough time to think about it and feel it, and sometimes you sit and you look out the window and all of a sudden a memory of your own comes up and, oh, write that down. Now keep going forward and explore what that means. if anything. But it's a connection. You find connections.
And do these first initial notes when you're asking the questions, does that come on that first read through, like Stella said, where you give yourself twice as much time as you think to let your imagination run wild? Is that when you're writing that down? Or does that come out, it's on that read through?
Yeah. Yeah. Unless you get a script and you don't have it printed out and it's on your, phone, like this particular movie that I'm working on next. I was traveling, so I read it on my cell phone in the airplane flying back home. And I got to tell you, but it was so good. I mean, I had a million questions, but I couldn't write on my phone, so I had like a little piece of paper. But you know what? I got the story, I understood it, and then when I got home, I immediately printed it out and wrote down what I remembered.
Appreciate you sharing those scripts with me. It's really cool to see. Like I don't come into contact very much with real life scripts. Like I might read one online or I might write one myself, but like to see one like that marked up and annotated is really cool. So I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, you saw enough of it, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Got the gist. I mean, that's one of my bigger ones, but yeah. And it was all in a white, one of those giant white 3-ring binders, and I would carry it with me. And then I had another one. Oh, this is the other thing. Okay, so I'm like an elder, right? And I don't want to wear my glasses on set because then, looking at my script, you have your script, right? And yes, you should know your lines, and usually I do, but I always like to have, just in case, if something, especially if like there's an emotional thing that happens, you might forget your line or whatever. So you always want to have it. But it's like I'm acting and it's like going this, it's all crazy. So I just decided to have bigger bigger font so that I could see it and I could like lay it down on a table or something like that and just looking at it and just like seeing one word, then you're off again. It's okay. But now I'm up to 48 point and it's almost like an eye chart. It's like one word per line and it's like getting the flow of it. It's weird, So anyway, that's too much information, probably.
Before we say goodbye, I want to ask you my last question, which I've just after my last interview at SI, I'm going to end every single podcast with this question. What does art done well look like to you?
It moves me and touches something and changes. I'm thinking about going to the d'Orsay in Paris and moving through those rooms, Monet and Van Gogh. And the first time I stood in front of one of his paintings, it moves. It's so powerful. And to this day, that's what art is. And there's no way it can be imitated.
That's good. Is there anything you want to plug before we jump off?
God, right now, Desert Road. I mentioned Desert Road. We had our premiere at South by Southwest and talking to distributors, making a decision. My other film that I did 2 years ago up in Newfoundland, The King Tide, is having its premiere in April. I'm going up to St. John's to be there. And I just found out I got nominated for Best Supporting Actress at the Canadian Screen Awards. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to coincide my trip and go over there to Toronto and be there because I think that's the first time that's ever happened. And I've got another movie that's in the can, waiting for distribution also. It always comes, as scared as I get, as scared as every actor gets. We always think, when are we going to work again? And it always seems to work out.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this interview, make sure you subscribe. And if you haven't already, go and check out our 3.5-hour-long deep dive into the life and career of James Cameron. And if you want even more from me, you could subscribe to the Artwell newsletter at the link in the show notes. And now, go do your thing. And whatever it is, do it well.